Okay guys, today let's talk a little bit about stainless steel polishing. If you got a car like mine in the 60s, it's got a lot of stainless on it, around the windows, around the sides. So you pop it off and you say, what am I going to do with it? So you think, well, I can clean it up with some water and see how it looks. And it looks just as crappy as it was on the car. If it's been on the car for decades, well, it's not going to look so great. You can try metal polish, anything you want, steel wool, anything. It's just not going to get the scratches out. It's not going to get the luster up. So I suggest, and this is what I usually do, is take the piece, first of all examine it to see if it has any dents. Hopefully it doesn't. Flip it over. On the inside, clean the inside really well. This will show up usually any little dents that you might have. And then you can take the piece and lay it down. Get a piece of wood that'll fit in there and just lightly tap and see if you can get that dent worked out. Be gentle with it because stainless kind of stretches a little bit when you're going to pound a dent out. It's going to stretch a little, so be careful with it. If you don't have any dents in it, well, that's a good sign. Then examine it for the scratches. If it's deep, you're going to have to probably sand it out. So you got to determine, where do I start with my grit? You want to be, somewhere that it's not real aggressive. The more aggressive, the more stainless you're going to take off, and I'll show you a piece in a minute what happened to me. So we got scratches in this piece. One's kind of deep, so I think I might start with 400 grit. Okay, so I'm taking some 400 grit sandpaper and I'm going to go with the grain of the stainless and investigate and see if it's taking the scratches out. Well, this one is deep, so I'm probably going to have to go a little heavier. Since I've used 400, I can take a small piece and we'll try 220. I'll go half of that. Now this is pretty aggressive, so I just want to be careful of this deep scratch. I'm only going to try to work on that area to see if it takes that scratch out. You'll have to flip your sandpaper a number of times because the stainless will really take the grit out of the paper. At the same time, it's going to aggressively attack the stainless. So I'm going to still see if I catch it with my fingernail. If not, then I'll go back to 400 and see if I can get the remainder of that scratch out of there. Finished going over the piece with 400 grit. And as you can see, I hope you can see, we're getting sort of a satiny finish now. It's not that dull. You can't see anything. There's actually a little bit of reflection of satin. And most of the heavy scratches are out. And we'll continue sanding. Now I'll go to 800 grit. One other thing, make sure you're wearing gloves. I wasn't wearing them the first thing, but this stuff is messy. Wear gloves. Protect yourself from the stainless too, because there's a lot of sharp edges. Number two, make sure before you change grits, wipe off your workpiece. You don't want any contamination of pieces of grit and stuff from the previous to get into this finish when you're going with a lighter sandpaper. And also make sure your work surface is clean of the previous grit also. Okay, so now I'll switch to 800 grit. Okay guys, I've got the sanding basically finished. So essentially I started with 400 grit, worked my way to 800 grit, then 1500 grit, then 2500 grit. I usually double each time that I use a certain grit paper. I usually double it for the next polish. So as you can see, I don't know if you can see it in this, there's some pretty good reflective properties right now with the stainless. And I'm going to show you outside how to finish it up with the buffing wheels. Okay, the first thing we're going to do in polishing our piece is put on a spiral sewn wheel. This is sort of a hard, compact cotton wheel that's in a, you can see the spiral sewn on it. You want to put the wheel on in the direction that the motor is going to turn. This particular unit, it turns in this fashion, so you want to put it so that the spiral is always wrapping upon itself. The second thing we want to remember is, since the motor is turning in this direction, we want to make sure we feed our piece in so that if anything happens, the piece will be thrown out that way and not back towards you. If it catches or something happens, this comes out at quite a force. This machine will really pull this piece through. So you got to hang on tight to begin with. So you want to make sure you're in this, what's called the safe zone. For this particular one, it's going to be like down here. You want to come in at an angle so that you're not catching the wheel, and it can pull the product right through. Okay, always make sure that you're wearing protective eyewear, goggles, and gloves. And if you're outside or even inside in particular, put a mask on. The residue from polishing with the compounds in that, it's quite messy. So if you can do it outside, it would be better. Next, we're going to take what's called a rake, and I'm going to surface the wheel. Cleans it up, makes it fluffier, and then we'll put our compound on. The compound I'm going to use for stainless is green, because I'm using this sewn wheel, and when I go to the loose cotton wheel, I'll also use the green product. I'm not going to use any black compound, which is a heavy cut. At this point in the way it came out with the sanding, I think I only have to use the green compound. And I'll show you, we'll do a cut first, then a color on the sewn wheel, and then we'll do a color on the loose cotton wheel. So I'm only going to put a little bit on the wheel. You'll see this, it only takes about a second or even less. You just want to come across. You don't want to load the wheel up too much. Just take the compound and just go across quickly. That's all you need to get started. Now we'll take our workpiece, and what I'm going to do is pull it back. I'm going to start by pulling it back. This will give a slight cut to the workpiece. piece moving, don't let it stay in one spot. You'll overheat and could burn the stainless. Use a moderate pressure, not too hard and not too light, so you get a little bit of a cut on the metal to take out any of the real fine scratches. I'm going to feed it in the direction of the wheel. Oh yeah, in case you're wondering, this is a Harbor Freight bench grinder buffer. It's worked out really well. I've had it for years. It's got plenty of power for me, and it's nice because it has, you know, this shaft comes out. It's not like just a regular bench grinder. This shaft comes out. It gives you that room for buffing larger pieces, so you've got the room to move in and out. So now I'm going to replace that spiral sewn wheel with a loose cotton wheel for final polishing. So I'm going to stick that in there and button that up. And we're still going to use the green compound on this, and we're only going to feed in for polishing. Alrighty, here's another original piece like we started. I don't know if the camera will pick this up or not. That's another piece that's off the car. And this is how we finished up. Again, I don't know if the camera really picks that up at all. I'll try to take a couple of still pictures. But it came out pretty nice. So like I said earlier, the buffing machine that I use is from Harbor Freight. It works well for me. It's a 3/4 horse. You don't need anything that powerful though. I mean, you can get by with a small bench grinder, take off the guards, put on a wheel that'll fit, and you'll have just about the same kind of results. If it gets too much, I mean, there are services out there. There are people that actually set up to handle stainless steel polishing and aluminum, believe it or not. So you may want to think about that. I get kind of a kick out of taking off a piece of an original stainless, the condition that it's in, and then seeing what the end result could be. It makes you feel good, even though I'm not going to deny this. It's time consuming. The time especially if you had any dents, and you got to start with the dents to work those out of the stainless, and then going to the sanding, and then the buffing. So it does take time. A couple other tips I'd like to talk to you about when polishing stainless. This particular piece is my rear quarter window trim. I was almost done polishing when I happened to notice, and I don't think you can pick it up, but there's a little pinhole right here. I got a little too aggressive, and at the very end, the polishing produced a flaw. This piece happened to be what was called flash chromed. GM used to cut corners a little bit with stainless steel, so they had stainless steel that wasn't very good quality. So what they used to do was, after the product was made or whatever, they would just flash chrome it. It wouldn't be a triple chrome, it wouldn't be any copper or nickel, it would just flash chrome over the stainless. Well, the inferior part of the stainless is that it has more iron in it than good stainless. So what happens is when you finally get the flash chrome off and you start to polish the stainless, you can catch little grains of iron. You might be having a nice smooth surface, then all of a sudden, boom, you've got this streak of a scratch in your piece, and you say, well, where did that come from? Well, it came from a little grain of iron, and it slipped right across the surface and produced another scratch. So now you almost have to start over again. I can't tell you how many hours I put in working on this piece, and that's, I'm sure, what happened with the little pinhole up here. I had so many grains of iron that were produced, and then I went to do another sand or whatever, and boop, it got so thin up here that it finally popped through. So just be careful if you run into stuff that's been flash chromed stainless, and if you're not getting it perfect, well, don't worry about it, because don't take it too far, because you could have the same problem that I did. And if it's a car like mine, a Buick, these parts aren't readily available. They're not that easy to find. So another tip on polishing, if you get a bigger piece like this can be awkward and dangerous when you're handling it with the buffer wheels. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll get a board whenever I can, and if this has got mounting screws or whatever, I'll mount this to the board and get most of my polishing done and feel a lot more safe. I can handle this board better than I can this sharp piece of stainless. We have something, just believe it or not, this piece that I'm going to show you goes on my car too. Now, this is a big piece of stainless. And my buffer wheels, the way it's set up, I don't have enough length on my shaft to stack more wheels. This is going to be tricky. I don't know how far I'll take this piece. In the same context, I'll show you another one. This goes on the car too. This thing's like 4.5 feet long. Like I was saying before, the battery died in my camera. I had to replace the battery at the end there. This car has got a ton of stainless, and it's not all, you know, obviously, you take pieces this big, it's not a lot of fun. So I get my buffing products from a couple of places. There's Caswell, which for me isn't too far from Rochester. I think it's in Lyons, New York. They have a lot of stuff. And sometimes, most of the time, I used to go down to Hershey every year in October for their car show and flea market. And there's always a couple of exhibitors, vendors down there that have buffing supplies. It's kind of fun, but it is, I mean, like I said, it's time consuming. When you're doing your buffing, don't use much product. The compound that you put on, just a little bit, half second, no more than a second. If you lay too much of that compound on the wheel, you won't get it off. It's greasy, and it'll start to, once it heats up, it starts to discard sort of right on the stainless, and then you have to kind of rub that stuff off. So you don't want to put much compound on, and you're not, you know, just you'll feel it. You need practice, but you'll get the feel of it, how much to put on there, when to rake the wheel to clean it, and so you know, I just thought maybe I'd show you a little bit of what I do. Now, some of the things may have other ideas, see other videos, they do it a different way, but I kind of had success for the most part, doing it this way. I like the sanding part because I can actually tilt and see the product and make sure I got all the scratches out. You don't see that as well when you're on the buffing wheel, because there are stronger compounds, the black compounds, the emery compounds, the different grits of those, and then you're using the I think there's a sisal wheel, S-I-S-A-L. I'm not real fond of that wheel, so I'd like to do my hand sanding myself to get it to a point where it's ready for the intermediate polishing, which is the you know, the spiral sewn wheel and then the loose cotton wheel. So I guess for now that's about it, guys. I'll talk to you soon then.